Miss Burdick is a 74-year-old former elementary school teacher who's been married to her husband for 50 years. They have 4 adult children and 8 grandchildren, all of whom live out of state, and she likes to communicate with them regularly via phone. Mrs. Burdick was in excellent health prior to her stroke. She had mild high blood pressure, but it was well controlled with diet and medications. She was very social and active, exercising weekly and hosting frequent gatherings at her home. She was also an avid reader who values keeping up with current events. Mrs. Burdick suffered a mild left hemisphere embolic stroke in September 2014. A CAT scan confirmed no mass or bleed, so TPA was administered. She received daily PT/OT and speech until she was discharged at 25 days post-onset. 30 days post-stroke, an initial assessment was conducted at my outpatient speech and language clinic. The Aphasia Diagnostic Profiles test was administered, and Mrs. Burdick was diagnosed with moderate non-fluent Broca's aphasia. She scored within the 70th percentile for her overall aphasia severity. Spontaneous speech was slow with frequent pauses and characterized by 2 to 3 word utterances. Her speech lacked grammatical variety, and she omitted obligatory verbs and mostly spoken nouns. A number of phonemic paraphasias were produced, and her repetition was poor, with multisyllabic words and phrases being a greater challenge. She revealed a high level of auditory comprehension. However, she demonstrated challenges with higher level syntactic and grammatical comprehension, but this is not uncommon at this point in recovery. Reading and writing weren't extensively examined, but she was able to read and comprehend short and simple text and write personally relevant information slowly and sometimes self-corrected. A brief assessment of cognitive linguistic functioning revealed no concerns regarding attention, memory, and visual spatial skills. The test of limb apraxia revealed mild to moderate oral and limb apraxia. Distal gestures were the most challenging, and she also demonstrated difficulties with oral respiratory gestures such as yawning on command. Given her high level of performance on the auditory comprehension subtests, it's unlikely that comprehension was the underlying cause of her performance. Mrs. Burdick presents with non-fluent speech, but relatively intact auditory comprehension. Her limited spoken output is aided by her ability to use gestures, intonation, and facial expression. Her attention and memory are intact, and she's able to dress and groom herself independently. Despite high scores on the communication of daily living tasks, an interview with both Mr. and Mrs. Burdick revealed that her spoken output difficulties are hindering communication with her family and friends. She reports not calling her children or having anyone over to her house due to the frustration she's experiencing. These observations were taken into consideration when planning therapy. Over the course of treatment, the long-term goal was for Mrs. Burdick to improve her expressive language production and be able to carry out weekly communication with her children over telephone or Skype. The first short-term goal was for Mrs. Burdick to increase her utterance length to 4 to 5 word utterances 80% of the time as measured by MLU in 2 3-minute spontaneous speech samples. Melodic intonation therapy was employed 5 days a week for 60-minute sessions. At baseline testing, her MLU was 2 to 3 words, and after 8 weeks of therapy, she successfully increased her MLU to 4 to 5 words per utterance. The second short-term goal was for her to produce 6 conversational scripts of 4 to 5 conversational turns with 80% accuracy within a single session. Conversational script therapy was employed in 60-minute sessions 5 days a week, and she also used a video-based script therapy program at home to foster the effectiveness of her progress. I met with Mr. and Mrs. Burdick prior to therapy to formulate personalized scripts of important topics for her to use in personally relevant situations. After 8 weeks of therapy, Ms. Burdick was able to accurately produce 6 of these conversational scripts with 80% accuracy. The third short-term goal was for Mrs. Burdick to increase the number of correct informational units produced in response to picture stimulus cards and in 3 personal recount conditions to 50% above baseline. A modified response elaboration therapy technique was employed in 3 60-minute sessions per week, since she had mastered 6 conversational scripts, and this technique allows for expansion and greater variability of spoken output. Picture stimulus cards depicted single actions, and personal recounts of her children, grandchildren, and recent get-togethers were used to expand on her verbal output. Reinforcement, modeling, and shaping were used to help expand her productions. Progress was measured by the number of correct information units produced, which included a variety of parts of speech that were grammatically correct and relevant to the stimulus cards and personal recounts. Baseline testing revealed an average of 4 CIUs, and after 8 weeks, her CIUs increased to 7. As a result, we're still working on reaching her goal of increasing CIUs to 50% above baseline. After 6 months of therapy, Mr. and Mrs. Burdick self-reported an improvement in communication with each other and to her children over the past 6 months. The ADP also revealed an improvement in fluency and that she spoke on average 4 to 5 words per utterance. A Skype session recorded between Mrs. Burdick and one of her children also revealed an average MLU of 4.6, an average of 3 conversational turns given a topic, and substantially more verbs and adverbs used.